Okay, everybody, we're going to have to play nice on this one. We're here with Mark Victor, my friend, and we are talking today here on Active Self-Protection Extra on John's Briefs about the problems between law enforcement and private citizens today. And I think this obviously goes well beyond any current situations, though, of course, George Floyd's death was a catalyst, a spark, as it were. I want to talk about that. Now, I'm going to lead in here, okay? So Mark and I are friends. Mark has his views and my views might be a little bit apart here. We haven't talked it through, but Mark says, hey, you know what the problem is and how to fix it. Let's talk about it. Today's video is brought to us by Firearms Legal Protection. Firearms Legal Protection is a legal defense program for lawful gun owners with a 24/7 emergency hotline and plans designed specifically for self-defenders. They are offering a discount on their plan to Ask fans, so hit the link in the description for that. Okay, so Mark, obviously this is your bailiwick, man. Understanding the law and criminal law in particular is your thing. And, you know, I think I want to start by saying a bunch of people have asked me for my opinion of what happened in George Floyd's death. And I mean, I watched that and it looked just like a murder to me. I mean, it doesn't look like a self-defense incident when somebody's like, well, John, what do we, when are you going to narrate it or whatever? I'm probably not. I mean, it's just, I don't just generally narrate murders, straight up murders. I just don't. And so I don't find there enough juice to make it worth the squeeze. But so Mark, you and I talked just a little bit, and I think this is maybe an indicative of a bigger problem.
Yes, you know, John, it's hard to know exactly where to jump in here because on one level we can talk about what happened to Mr. Floyd, and there's a lot to talk about there, frankly. On another level, we can talk about what's really the problem here. And, you know, if we're not asking the right questions, it doesn't matter what the answer is. The answer is not, oh, defund the police and more money for juvenile problems, more training for the police. Yeah, that's great, but that's not really the heart of our problem. So what I got to say about the Floyd thing, maybe we could start there. I watched the video. It certainly looked like a murder to me.
I mean, the jury's going to have to decide.
The jury will have to decide. But the most important thing that I would say right now about the Floyd situation that nobody seems to be saying, but I'll say, is we have to insist that this officer gets a fair trial.
Yes.
We have to insist on that.
We must.
It looks like a murder to me.
Yep.
It's very hard for me to understand, even as a criminal defense lawyer, how this isn't a murder. But there could be some arguments out there that it could be something a little bit lower, right? Because we generally have a first-degree murder concept, which I know a lot of people called for because their attitude is this is egregious. But first-degree murder is different than second-degree murder.
It is.
First-degree murder we like to distinguish with sort of a premeditated notion. This is generally the idea, and remember this is different in every state, but the general concept is, you know, the first-degree murder is reserved. This is a sort of a special kind of a murder when somebody is, you know, acting in a premeditated way. They're thinking about it long before with cool heads. Right. Maybe they were lying in wait. That's the idea of premeditation. Now, there are forces in our country that want to take this idea of premeditation and shrink it down even to as short a period of time as successive thoughts in the mind, which has been rejected in a lot of places. But the question is, how do we distinguish first from second? Because second is an intentional killing, an intentional taking of a human life. Certainly looks like second to me. I don't know. There could be information out there that could come to light that could certainly change my mind, that would make me feel that this officer planned this ahead of time or something. Maybe.
But the only way to find out is to have a fair trial.
Got to have a fair trial. And it's especially in the cases where everybody's upset.
Right.
Everybody's on fire about let's lock this guy away and let's bury him under the prison. Fair enough. I understand that. But the way we deal with these problems in a civilized society is not just a fair trial, but a scrupulously fair trial.
Right.
I want this guy to have good defense lawyers. I want them making all the right objections. I want a fair jury pool. I want people who don't come in with preconceived notions but can put things aside. Everybody's seen this video, but put it aside.
There's going to be nobody that hasn't heard of it.
Put it aside and start fresh with an open mind, because there's an important piece of the puzzle we don't know about yet. Because in a criminal case, it's not just a matter of what you did. We all saw what this guy did. What we don't know yet is exactly what he was thinking.
Yeah.
I could imagine lots of different things here. I don't know. few, if any of them, may exonerate him. But what if the guy had a brain tumor at the time, and that
Right.
brain tumor was sort of causing him to act? I don't know. Maybe that's something we take into consideration. Maybe he was drunk. Now, this isn't something that would exonerate him, and it
No.
shouldn't be. We're responsible but that might affect things.
But it might change it from murder two to manslaughter. Maybe.
It would certainly take away a first-degree charge.
Yeah.
Actually, I should say certainly. There's an argument that could take away a first-degree charge. But what if he says, look, I was afraid of the crowd, and I was focusing on them, and I kind of sort of blanked on what I was doing here? What if that's actually true?
Yeah.
Doesn't mean he's exonerated, but it might take his mental state, what we talk about a lot.
All the time. Mens
Mens
rea.
rea, right? What's going on in the head? Is he intending a death here? Is he reckless about whether a death, maybe I knew this guy could die, but I didn't want that, but I really wasn't worried about it. Was he something less than that? Was he just negligent? Was he mesmerized by the crowd where he wasn't paying attention? Hard to imagine that for sure. But I want to know the answers to those questions. And the reasonable person at this point, I think, in the justice system says, you know what? Let's get all the facts. Let's give him a scrupulously fair trial. And then if he's convicted of second-degree murder, let's punish him appropriately.
Yes.
That's the way a civilized society deals with this.
Well, and that's what I think our judicial system is designed to do. Okay, we're all angry with this big thing, but we don't want a mob to carry out vigilantism. What we want instead is, with cooler heads prevailing, arguments on both sides being made, and then an impartial jury of their peers being the finder of fact. No, this is truly what happened in that moment.
The rule of law has to apply here. Now, let me also say something maybe a tad bit controversial, or more than a tad.
I know you'll be surprised if Mark says something controversial.
It's happened in the past. But look, this may have been an act of racism, an act that was motivated by racism.
Maybe.
And it may not have been.
We don't know.
Merely that the victim of the police brutality has dark-colored skin doesn't mean necessarily that that's the motivation behind it, right?
Well, and let me say that from my perspective, and maybe if I step away from being, active self-protection to just being John, I think, obviously our country has a long history, and my friends who are people of color have been a narrative that's been said so many times that you see that narrative in play, and sometimes I don't understand that as a white guy, but I can appreciate it, and I can understand where it comes from for sure. But that doesn't mean this action was racially motivated.
There's no question our country has a terrible history, but nobody alive today was involved in that history. There are racist people today.
Yep.
There are people that hate people because they're black or they're Jews or they're Mexicans. There's no shortage of idiots who dislike other people because of stupid things like immutable characteristics. We know that that's the case. But was that the case here? Maybe it was, and maybe it wasn't. Yeah. Because speaking as a civil rights attorney, and speaking as somebody who has been a victim personally of police brutality, people know, and it's on my website if they're interested.
Go on your website, you can see Mark's story.
On my website, there's a video on the homepage called What I Learned from Liars and Neanderthals. It's my story of how I was almost killed. Yes, I was on the bottom of the pile yelling, I can't breathe, because I couldn't breathe while they were yelling, stop resisting. It was shocking and surreal to be in that situation. But I was on my last gasp of air when I squeaked out, I can't breathe. And the last time I checked, I'm a white guy. So police brutality is a real problem. Some of it is motivated by racism, but I'm worried about police brutality because we all are potential victims of this. Isn't just limited to African Americans or black people or whatever you want to call people who are of color, because that stuff doesn't, that what we call it and these things, we need to get past race, and we're never going to get past race until we get past race. So we need to get past race. Let's listen and follow the teachings of somebody who I admire, Martin Luther King Jr., who said, look, let's not judge people by the color of their skin. Let's judge them by the content of their character. I couldn't agree more.
Sure.
And so let's look at this case for what it is. Maybe the guy was racist. Maybe he wasn't. But it's damn sure a police brutality case, and it should be dealt with appropriately. This is an everybody issue. So the reaction to this of let's defund the police, this is missing the mark to me, right? I mean,
I mean, at the very least, I think what we want to say here is we want to be scrupulously careful to get a fair trial
No
here.
question.
And I worry that no matter how the result comes out, that there's going to be folks who say, yeah, but that's injustice either way. If he gets convicted or if he gets acquitted.
But the jury decides that. Sorry, in a civilized society, the jury listens to all the evidence. We've got lots of intricate rules about what evidence is presented, what evidence doesn't get presented. They get to review it. They represent the community. They get to decide what the right answer is here. And then the judge will make a decision about what the punishment is. I expect that to be scrupulously fair as well. If this guy's convicted of second-degree murder, he ought to be punished appropriately, exactly the
100%.
way someone who's not a police officer gets punished. We should all be treated the same exact way. Look, talking about doing away with the police, we need the police. People violate important laws like murder and rape and robbery and burglary. Somebody's got to chase them down. I don't want to chase them down.
Right.
You don't want to chase them down. The real problem here, yes, we could improve policing. And by the way, what we really should do, in my opinion, is privatize the police. Yeah, well, let's talk about it. We need market forces in policing. What I want to do is say, you know what, if the local police are doing a bad job, let's terminate their contract and hire a different provider of police services, and let's make them responsive to what we, the community, want. If they're acting like a bunch of thugs, then sorry, we don't renew the contract. And let's get competing police agencies to say, hey, you know, our guys are highly trained. Here's 5-star reviews from other municipalities who have hired our corporations to provide policing to the local people. They say we do a great job balancing using force to get bad guys and being courteous to the people who hire us, the people we work for, the community, right? They're agents. They're not our masters. The people in the government are our agents. They work for us. I want a police department that has that attitude, and I want to be able to fire them if they got the wrong attitude. The only way we're going to get that is if there's competition in the marketplace.
I think that would be interesting if every 3 years the city of Phoenix took bids from MCSO and Phoenix PD and Glendale and Peoria and said, okay, who wants to police for the next 3 years and what's our best bet here? That's an interesting theory.
Well, let's not pretend that this is really much more complex than hiring private security. Private security is a big operation in this country, and you hire the private security protector that does the right job at the right price. That's what I think we're entitled to that. And I think having the government run it, where it's a one-size-fits-all, and if you don't like it, too bad, maybe you can hire a new mayor or something like that, that's not enough. We need more market sort of responses here. We need more market competition. And let's let the best policing agencies be the providers of police services. But if you really want to get to what's wrong, what's really wrong in our society, the law's wrong. I don't care how good a job the police do at enforcing the laws. If the laws are screwed up, then we're always going to have problems. And I'll give you a good example of that. No matter how good properly trained officers are, if they're arresting people for peacefully smoking marijuana in their backyard, the law's wrong, and the police are doing the wrong thing.
Here it gets spicy.
We need to change the law. We need to get our heads around the idea that legality and morality are different things. Look, moral views are important, critically important, maybe even most important. But they're different than legal views, right?
We've said this on the channel many times.
They're different than legal views. Take your moral views, and if they're good moral views, convince your neighbor to be virtuous.
So this is what Mark and we haven't talked about this on the channel a ton, but I know you're a part of a movement that I'm very interested in called Live and Let Live. Some people are going to hear this and it's going to sound a little like libertarianism because there's some principles that are similar. But Live and Let Live says, look, you do you. And I will let you do you as long as it does not infringe on my basic core human rights as well. That I'll live and let you live. And so we've said this, and I've said it before. I mean, I think a lot of this comes down to the failed drug war, quite frankly.
The drug war, if you want to know why we've had this complete clash between police and citizens over the years, it's the drug war.
Last 40 years at least.
It's the drug war that has the Supreme Court, in the name of the drug war, has given more and more and more discretion to law enforcement to pull people over for ticky-tack little reasons, get everybody out of the vehicle, delay them, pat them down, basically harass them in the name of looking for the green leafy substance. And it needs to change. Look, there needs to be a balance, right? Because police officers do have a legitimate fear on the side of the road. But that you pulled somebody over for, say, a tail light out or something isn't enough for me to say this police officer has such a fear of the danger to the police officer that everybody can be taken out of the car. In fact, we had a case, the Wren case. I think it's W-H-R-E-N. And I think the Supreme Court made a big mistake in this case. They said, look, basically, we don't really care what the cop was thinking. He wants to, he thinks maybe you're a troublemaker, maybe you left a house where there could be drugs. He doesn't have any reason to pull you over, but let me follow him. Let me find a little crack in the windshield, little tail light out.
Failure to maintain lane.
Something stupid, ticky-tack, I'm going to pull you over for that, and that's a good stop. A lot of our federal appellate courts didn't agree with that. They said, look, the test should be, would a reasonable officer under these circumstances have pulled this person over? If the answer is no, then it's a bad stop.
Yeah.
Sorry. We need to readjust the relationship between police officers and citizens, because when police officers smash the front door down and come in looking like the guys I served with in the United States Marine Corps and stick AR-15s in people's faces and put grandma on the floor and the kids on the floor and drop flashbang grenades and maybe shoot the dogs, people get upset about this.
They do, and they should.
And they should.
Yeah.
The rules should apply equally to the police as well as to the citizens. Citizens don't get to do that stuff. Police officers shouldn't get to do that stuff either.
So I think what we're hearing here is that the broader sense is that we really need, as a society, to readjust and think through. And so, when I see protests all over the country, I think, number one, as an American, a protest is fantastic.
Peaceful protest.
First Amendment right. That doesn't include rioting. That doesn't include looters. Those things aren't included. But peaceful protest, I value peaceful protest as much as a free press, the free worship, free speech. As much as the Second Amendment.
The core of being an American.
Amen.
It's no less important than the Second Amendment, and that's the crowd I know we're talking to.
I'd argue it's even more important. That's why it's first. That's honest truth. I would argue it's more important. If you said, John, you got to do without either the First Amendment or the Second Amendment, I will do without the second if I only had one to do with. I don't want to do without either.
I'm not giving up either.
I don't want to give up either, and I'm not going to. I'm just saying if I had to. And so reapproaching, that's okay. But I do think we want to think about here that with this case, as in with every other case, we want to very scrupulously ensure that we get a fair trial here so that the result we get is justice.
Yeah, and look, to be clear about this, we absolutely can't tolerate any racism at all in our justice system.
Zero.
To the extent there is some, and by the way, I gotta say, in fairness, in 26 years, I haven't had one occasion to raise this argument because we have minorities of all types in positions of judges, prosecutors, defense attorneys, probation officers. Am I saying that nobody's racist in the system? No, I'm not saying that. I'm sure there are racist idiots everywhere. We need to deal with them in the government. The government needs to be neutral on all matters. I don't care. If you want to harbor idiotic views in your world against short guys like me or people of different color skin or nationalities or who cares, whatever, do it peacefully. I don't want to tell you what to think. You want to be an idiot peacefully. The second you start initiating force against somebody, you violate what I call the live and let live rule.
And make no mistake, the judicial system is initiating force against people. They're putting people in prison. They're taking away their freedom. That's force.
They should only do it as a punishment for somebody who has initiated force, fraud, or coercion against another person. This is a remedy, right? This is a way to say, look, you shouldn't be bothered by the government unless and until you have initiated force, fraud, coercion, or created a substantial risk, right? You put the gun in somebody's face, You did something like that. Now you're messing with somebody. Unless and until you are messing with somebody, right, you should be left alone. Even if you're acting immorally, even if you're acting in ways we don't like, if you're peaceful and you're not violating the rule. This is what freedom is about. It's what I like to sometimes say, the dark side of freedom. Not everybody's going to use their freedom in ways we think they should use their freedom, but it's precisely those cases, right, when somebody wants to say, use meth, or be a prostitute, or have different religious views, or no religious views, or whatever they want to do with their lives. If they're peaceful, let's try to persuade them all day long.
Sure.
Let's try to persuade people to being virtuous. But you can't legislate a virtuous society. And we need to stop trying to do that.
It's true. So there's some interesting things I think that we get out of today's video. And I think the biggest thing is, number one, for people who are self-defenders, I think it's okay to be angry about this stuff. And I'm, generally seen as pro-police and pro-law enforcement. And generally speaking, I think they're good people trying to do good work. But when we see abuses like this, most cops I know are so angry about this too.
Yes.
And it's okay and good to be angry about it. It's okay and good right now to say we have to make some changes.
I like to say I'm very, very pro
Good cop.
and very, very anti bad cop. And I've spent time in my career defending the good cops who are charged with things in an unpopular situation and going after bad cops. As you know, I got lawsuits pending right now going after cops for using excessive force. I would love to go after this cop in this department. That's what we do. But look, we also have to be realistic, okay? Even in the Marine Corps, we like to say there's 10%.
Yeah, there's going to be doofuses that you've got to deal with.
They're going to get through as hard as we try. It doesn't mean that the whole department is bad. It also doesn't mean that they're not bad either. I want to look at it with an open mind. You may have some departments here that are bad. Wouldn't it be great if we could just fire them? Sorry, your contract is up. We're going to hire a different provider of police services. Out with the old, in with the new. Here's the rules we want enforced. Have fun.
Have fun. That's an interesting concept. I think one we can explore. Next week, what we're going to talk about, and I think this is a big one we're going to spend some time on, is Marcus dealt with this in his space, but we haven't talked about it on Active Self-Protection Extra, and that is resisting arrest and an unlawful arrest in particular. See you next week.